everyone. Welcome to our last session of Summit. Hope you all are excited. And after this, we will release you to Ship It Live and Bash and all the fun stuff that we have planned for you after. But thank you so much for making the time for this talk this afternoon. And I'm delighted to be able to introduce Erika, one of our product managers for Jira Software Cloud. Fun fact about Erika that you might not know otherwise is that she survived being hit by a taxi when she was 12 years old. So she's still here with us today to talk to us about Jira, and I hope that you all have great questions for her and look forward to hearing what she has to tell us about Jira's usability journey. Okay, take it away.
Thanks, Shannon. Hi, everyone. I'm Erika. I'm a product manager for Jira Software here at Atlassian. Thanks so much for coming to this session. I've been really looking forward to this. It's been a while since our team has been on a journey towards better product usability in Jira Software, and it's all really thanks to you guys. You've given us a lot of feedback that Jira is super powerful and configurable, but it can feel complex at times. So we've been working really hard to address this by improving Jira's usability and making it simply powerful. And so we're finally ready to share some of the exclusive behind the scenes with you today. And all I ask for you is to not just sit back and relax that Jira is getting improved, that Jira is getting simply powerful, but to reflect back on your team. What is your team doing to improve product usability, and what can you take away from what we've tried? So with that in mind, let me first start off by sharing what an average Monday morning for Jira's product managers look like. Like with any good old Aussies, it starts with a warm cup of flat white. And then we get to our desk, we open our laptop and check our emails, which I'm sure is pretty similar to most of your days. But what makes our Monday morning special is this weekly customer digest email. It's an automated email that lands in our inbox every Monday morning, and it has a list of randomized customer feedback. So it's very convenient. And if you don't have something like this at your company, we highly recommend it. It's a really quick and easy way to kick off your week by building customer empathy and possibly even finding some things that you can fix to address customer pain points. Well, except sometimes we don't know what to do with it when we get conflicting feedbacks like this. Let's see. This developer here is very happy and thinks that Jira is easy to use, flexible, and stable. And then this other developer here thinks that Jira is so effing unusable that we should fire our UX designers. That's pretty angry. I mean, what's happening here? Aren't they using the same exact product, Jira? But it's as if one is using it in hell and the other in heaven. I mean, how good is Jira's usability? Well, maybe, just maybe, since half says it's good and the other half says it's bad, they kind of cancel each other out? No, of course not. We know that product usability is important. I mean, otherwise, I wouldn't be giving this talk right now. And why is it important? Well, because Jira is a productivity tool. We exist so that you can be smarter, faster, and more efficient in what you do. Especially when your job is as demanding as it is, the last thing we want to do is to add any additional cognitive load to your day. But this is exactly what poorly designed products can do. Even something as simple as turning the light on can be stressful if you have a switcher like this. Anyone can get it wrong. Which one turns on which light and which way is on or off? It doesn't even matter how smart you are. You will get it wrong a few times. And it's funny because you tend to blame yourself as well. Oh, this is the 500th time I'm doing that. I should know this. Well, no, it's not your fault. It's the product's fault. A product that you use on a daily basis should make your life easier, not harder. So like the switcher you just saw, or like this wine glass for me, or like Jira for you, every interaction should be frictionless. And if anything, it should be adding delight to your day. And we really, really want you to be engaged and loving the experience. We don't want you to just use Jira because you have to. I mean, you should be loving it so much that you get a license plate customized for Jira, like Randy here. Randy runs the Jira admin team at Blizzard, a billion-dollar company that made our favorite games like World of Warcraft or Overwatch. And Randy helps hundreds of teams across the globe get the most out of Jira. And so as you can tell, how Jira works can make or break his day. And of course, we want to make Randy's days. I mean, look at his face, look at his happy face. So, for Randy and for all of you, we've been on this journey for a long time, and we've tried one too many tricks along the way. But for today, I've narrowed them down into 3 that we found the most valuable when improving Jira's usability. So today, I'm going to talk about, first, how we quantified Jira's usability down into 1 number. Second, how we leverage customer knowledge to make Jira simply powerful. And finally, how we're building and flexing usability muscles on a daily basis to make sure that Jira stays polished. Let's first go back to the question I asked before. How good is Jira's usability? I mean, we have a good crowd here. Maybe we can take a quick poll about this? All right, so who thinks Jira's usability is good, that it's easy to use, that it provides everything that you need? All right. Now, who thinks it's okay, that it can be better? Okay, all right. Who thinks it's bad? You guys are good. I won't be offended. We all get trained for this at Atlassian. All right. So as you can see, there's no right or wrong answer. It's purely subjective. But when customer feedbacks are this subjective, it's hard for us to act on. And so at Atlassian, we tried to bring some objectivity to this very subjective matter of usability by using UMUX Lite. UMUX stands for usability metric for user experience. And it's one of the many metrics out there that helps you put a number on your product's usability. And we chose this one specifically because it's a quick and easy 2-question survey, so it's pretty simple to capture and also measure. And this is what the survey looks like in the product. The first question asks you how well the product is meeting your need, and the second one evaluates the ease of use. So with UMUX Lite, we're making sure that Jira is providing value and also that it's easy for you to get to that value. And of course, we ask you why behind each score so we can do something about it. And it's been quite interesting. Just by having a metric on product usability, we saw that it was changing and shaping the way we work. Let me give you a few examples. First, now we had a baseline to understand where we're at. UMUX Lite is widely used in the industry, so there are many research done on this topic, and a lot of the companies share their scores. So if you have UMUX Lite score for your product, you can create a map like this. And unfortunately, you can't find Jira up there because I haven't finished going through the legal process to share it with you today. But the idea is that this allows you to objectively compare your product's ease of use to some of your other favorites. And the result can be either a shocker or a relief, but it will give your team an honest and objective starting point. Second, we were able to set goals on product usability. Now, this is something we didn't have before. We've always set company-wide product goals using OKR, objectives, and key results, but we were only tracking something like product conversion rate or product performance, but never product usability. And having goals meant that our team had focus. I mean, of course, we always cared about usability, but having a company-wide goal and having a dashboard set up to track your progress against it meant that everyone had a little more reason to feel accountable and a little more pressure to actually prioritize and execute for impact. And last but not least, it let us know when things went wrong and why. Like I said, we had UMUX Lite dashboard set up to track our progress against the goal. And this really came in handy when we first rolled out the biggest design update in Atlassian's history last year. when we updated the look and feel and navigation for all cloud products. Let's take a quick look. Now, this was Jira's classic look. This looks okay, and it served us well. But it looks a little dated, and it's sort of been looking the same for almost 5 years. I mean, 5 years, that's when BlackBerry was still a thing. My 12-year-old cousin who has an iPhone probably doesn't even know what a BlackBerry is. And so, as you can see, many things have changed and improved over those 5 years, including customer expectation for good design and usability. And so, it was time for Jira to get a facelift too, with the new Atlassian Blue. It's fresh, it's clean, and it's consistent with all other cloud product experience. And if you go to the project directory screen, it's organized. It clearly shows you the hierarchy of objects in Jira, and you can quickly get to the recently viewed items too. And if you go into one of the projects, the sidebar feels much less cluttered, the user color scheme is consistent, and the board looks great. And we also got some great responses from usability tests too. So you get the idea. This looks awesome. And you would expect that our UMUX Lite score would go up when we introduced this to customers. Or at least we thought so. Well, not exactly. So we wanted to introduce the change gradually. So initially we rolled it out to just a small percentage. As you can see in the orange line here, in January we rolled it out to 25% and ramped that up to 80% in February. But as we increased the rollout, we found that UMUX Lite score was going down, like what you see with the blue line there. Now, I didn't write out our score, but you can clearly see the trend that as more and more people were seeing the latest update, UMUX Lite score was going down. This was bad. Basically, in February, we had to stop the rollout and investigate what was going on. I mean, sure, we knew some of it was people getting used to the change, but it wasn't just that. While some people loved and embraced the new updates, others found some things difficult in the new interface, like finding the things important to them, or even how to get to the board quickly. It really showed that no matter how much research we did up front, there's always going to be something we missed, especially with such big design and navigation updates like what we did. But thanks to UMUX Lite score, we were able to catch the spots that we missed and iterate. So, what do we do about the sad UMUX Lite score and the angry comments? We're working on it. Like this. For those of you who wanted to keep important things close to you, you can just star them in the navigation drawer now, like your board, your project, or even your filters. And you can quickly go back to them whenever you need it. And for those of you who found it difficult to get back to your board, now you can do so with a board switcher. And you can quickly create a new board here too. So as you can see, a dip in UMUX Lite score led us to double-click into the issues and push them even farther. And so as we've been iterating, we're seeing changes in the scores again, and this time a positive one. But as you can see, we still got a long way to go, which is why we're going to be watching your feedback and this score closely to make sure that we're iterating to improve this experience. And fingers crossed that this trend continues. As you can see, if you're serious about improving your product's usability, you have to put a number on it. From understanding where you stand in the market to actually setting goals and tracking your progress against it, it's really the first step towards everything. So, what next? Now, numbers are great, but numbers will also tell you so much. But like what we talked about before, product usability is a very subjective matter. It's not even about the product. It's about who's using it and how they're using it. I mean, this shouldn't come as a surprise to you. Look around you. We have IT administrators, project managers, DevOps managers, engineers, designers, and I could probably just keep going. You all have different jobs and motivations, and so of course, You all have different things that you like to get done in Jira. So to understand this better, we went out and talked to you. And I mean many, many of you. We asked what your day-to-day tasks are, what success looks like for you, and how Jira helps you get there. For after all the research that we did and all the customer interviews, what we found was that what's more important than you individually is actually the shape and form of your team. I mean, it makes sense. If you think about it, you come to Jira to work as a team, and how you use Jira is defined by your team's way of working. And we also found that there's a general pattern in your team's way of working. Like what TUCKMAN model explains. A newly formed team doesn't become successful in just one day. It goes through phases like this. So in the beginning, when the team is formed, there's chaos, lack of process, and maybe people are pulling each other's hair and stepping on each other's toes. And so then they're going to start putting in processes and guidelines in place. And only over time and practice, team becomes a successful one. And what this means for us is that teams coming to Jira can be in any of these stages, and Jira should be able to meet any of their needs. So to do that, we needed a few reference points, something to help us understand their different needs and expectations better, so we can be confident that what we're building is scalable and flexible enough. And we call them Jira Software Team Profiles. Now, they're fictional teams based on real teams out there that we talk to. And each one captures a certain type of teams with shared characteristics and level of maturity based on how they use the product or what type of processes they have. And here are three that we use a lot when building the new Jira experience in cloud: Hive, Zero, and Megacorp. Now I'm going to share some examples of how we solve problems for these teams based on their maturity, their process, and their perception of Jira's usability. But let me first tell you a bit about these teams, since you can't tell much from just their names. First team, Hive, represents young team. So imagine a 5 to 10 people startup. They need to get the MVP out the door real soon, and they have piles of work to do. So it's kind of a crazy scene where a developer is also a product manager making decisions over there, and also a designer creating assets over here. And everyone is using different tools, just whatever is cheap and easy to get. And now, this team may be in a bigger organization as well. But the idea is that they're young and busy and things are ad hoc, so they don't have time for a process. And typically when these teams come to Jira, they find it too powerful and that it takes too much time to set up. Second team profile, Zero, is in a better shape than Hive. Their business is on track and their company is growing, but because they're growing so fast, they're feeling the pain of scaling. And so maybe important things are slipping through the crack and everyone is stepping on each other's toe. And so they try to bring some order in place by experimenting with different processes. Maybe it's different agile methodologies or different deployment tactics. It's just a lot of trial and error until they get it right. And we find that these teams love Jira because it offers anything that they might ever need, but they just don't know where to start. The last one, Megacorp, as you can tell from its name, they're big, they're organized, and they got rules in places because at this level, they have to. They just have so many stakeholders and dependencies to manage. And these teams typically have not just a Jira admin, but a team of Jira admins, because the way they use Jira is just as complex as the structure of their organization. And historically, Jira has been very popular with megacorps. Not to brag, but Jira has been one of the few tools that could support and meet these type of teams' complex needs. But moving into the cloud space, we saw more Hive and Zero type of teams joining. Maybe they hear that Jira is great from one of their friends in Megacorp. But when they land in Jira, we saw a lot of them struggling because they were overwhelmed. It was too powerful for them. Jira is indeed very powerful, and it can definitely meet any of these teams' needs. But it just wasn't doing so gracefully. What I mean by gracefully is that Jira should be revealing more and more power when and where these teams need it, so it's not overwhelming anyone. And if anything, it should be supporting teams in each and every step of the way as they scale. And this is how Jira can be simply powerful. So let me show you how we use these team profiles to take an existing feature and reimagine it to be more simply powerful. Well, how about workflow? Workflow is the power of Jira. You can confidently say that you're getting the most out of Jira if you can customize a killer workflow. But does every team need to know every single thing about workflow to build the one that's right for them? Probably not. For example, here's a feedback from John. Should be simpler to create workflow for small startup teams. Too many options and too many fields and not enough time. Just need in review for QA. I mean, as a typical Hive team, all John wants to do is to add that in review column for QA on his board. And he's frustrated because it's taking longer than what he expected. Let's take a closer look at what John is talking about. So to add a column to his board, John probably landed in board setting and found the column management page. So he added a column, but then realized that there's this thing called status, and his column is missing it. But what's a status, he asks. Okay, here's a question mark. This should be helpful. He clicks into it, which takes him out to this documentation that talks about this thing called simplified workflow that doesn't seem so simple. But if John is patient enough, he will read through this documentation, and maybe a few more, just to make sure he understands. And if he indeed understands that workflow is an issue's life cycle, and that status is just one of the stages in that workflow, then John's going to land back in project setting. So he can add a status to his workflow. Now, there it is, in review. But, he's not done yet. There's one more step left. Now John needs to go all the way back to his board setting, find his column, and map his status. And whew, that was quite a journey. And obviously, John's not happy. For a typical Hive-like team like John's, all they're looking for is something simple. They don't want to know what a status is, what a transition is, what workflow is. They just want to add a column to their board. So in the new Jira Experience in Cloud, we made this as simple and straightforward as possible by bringing it to the board. Now John can just add a column right there in context, give it a name in review, and move it to wherever he wants without going into board setting or project setting. All he needs to know now is that his board reflects the way his team works. So for Hive type of teams, the board is their workflow, and this will work well for them for a while. Well, until it doesn't, because the team is going to grow and scale into something like 0. And they'll reach a point where they need more from Jira's workflow to optimize their process. So here's what this might look like in John's team again. Let's say John's team keeps growing, and now they have a dedicated designer, Helen, working closely with the team. And so every piece of work that requires design goes through Helen, and she also does the final review before things get deployed, just to make sure that nothing gets lost in translation and they're not shipping a broken experience. So to reflect this new process, the team adds a few new columns to the board. Super easy. So now all the work needs to go through design, into development, and then back to design review before getting deployed to customers. Except now, some team members keep forgetting to assign Helen after transitioning issues from development into design review. And so Helen gets notified of her work too late that she becomes a blocker in the team. And she's super stressed because she's already busy being the only designer for the team. Thankfully, Jira has some cool automation built in, such as post function that automatically updates the signing up on transition. John's team can just go and set it up, right? Well, to do that, John Lynn's back in our documentation, and guess what? This time, it's really advanced. To have anything automated in Jira, you need to fully comprehend the concept of status, workflow, and transition, and all of these different types of automation. And that's not something everyone has time for, especially if you don't need all of it. John's team just wants to automate some repetitive tasks, and this is important to any teams really. We'd all rather spend our time doing the job that we were hired for than spending it in Jira, updating fields or assigning issues or feeling bad about forgetting to do so. So, in the new experience, what did we do to make this easier for John's team? We brought it to the board again. Like what you've probably seen in the keynotes, basically you can choose which rule you'd like to set up. In this case, updating assignee upon transition. Select the status you want to apply to, and the assignee issue should be assigned to. Awesome. Now Helen and the team doesn't need to worry about missing anything. As you can see, as teams grow and scale, their needs evolve. And this is reflected in how we're building out the power of workflow in the new Jira experience. We're gradually introducing more power in the order of teams' evolving needs. So the same applies for megacorps too. They'll have more advanced needs like customizing different workflow for different work types or creating templates out of a set workflow to copy and paste. Now, that might actually require some comprehensive knowledge of workflow. And while I'm dying to share what exciting things we have in plan for these teams, fortunately they're work in progress, so I can't share too much today. But if you're really interested, come find me after the talk, and maybe I'll spill some beans over some beers. But back to the point I was making there. Workflow is just one of the examples of how we use team profiles to break down a feature and make it more scalable and flexible. And we recommend you to try this out as well. Look at what best defines the way your customers use your products. For us, it was team maturity, but for your team, it could be something completely different, like customer's role, or the industry they're in, or their lifestyle. And whatever it is, it will open up possibilities for you when you're building out a new feature or taking an existing one and reimagining them. So what I talked about so far might sound like something big that you invest in once and then move on to the next thing. But improving product usability is actually not a one-time effort. You can't just wipe your hands clean just because you have a deck of customer profiles now. It's an ongoing exercise like building muscles. It doesn't just happen in one day. It takes discipline and persistence. Your team needs to regularly practice the mindset of putting usability up in front in order to make sure your product stays polished. Especially if your team is agile, this is something to be mindful of. A lot of agile teams tend to cut corners when they're defining MVP, the minimal viable product. The whole point is to ship lean, learn fast, and iterate, right? The dark side of this is that a lot of the teams are pressured to move on to the next thing as soon as they ship MVP. Because oftentimes you're just trying to validate an idea or to hit a business goal, even if the execution isn't perfect. And what gets cut from the MVP scope? Design, iteration, and polish. Maybe cutting scope on one feature is okay, but if you keep cutting corners on everything, you're going to end up with a half-baked product where your customers find inconsistencies or broken experiences in every action that they take. So both you and your team need to find a way to address this. So in Jira Software Team, we have a few rituals in place to make sure that we're keeping usability the first thing in our minds. I might need a whole new talk to go through them in details, but maybe I can highlight a few. In Jira Software Team, we throw a party every 2 weeks. What party am I talking about? A Jira Software teardown party, where everyone gets into the same room, sets up a whole new instance, and starts playing around with it or tearing it apart like someone has never used it before. And we sometimes bring cakes to it, and everyone is excited about this, so it's kind of a party. The idea is that everyone gets to challenge the existing experience with a fresh pair of eyes. And we spend 10% of each sprint fixing the problems that we picked up from this party. And at this party, we go through a few things. We start by going through the onboarding experience, including the sign-up, to make sure that there are no friction points for evaluators. And then we also look at the recently shipped features, revisiting the scopes that got cut before. And we might also find some other paper cuts and broken experiences that we need to keep track of. And all the things that we pick up gets logged into our UX paper cuts and iterations project. And each of them gets grouped into one of these categories. Like I explained before, bug captures any UX broken experiences. Paper cuts are small design or interactive improvements that we didn't capture before. Feature iteration collects a bigger impact polished items that should have made it to MVP but didn't. And ideas are basically any good ideas or suggestions that we think should be captured for a better customer experience. And at the end, you'll have a pile of usability issues to fix, like what we have here. We review and triage this list on a weekly basis. And once they're prioritized, we move them to the board, where all of these issues go through the workflow to get resolved. First, prioritized items land in triaged, and then the items that require PM or design input for copy or image update gets moved to the next step. And once they're ready for development, then we bring a few items to each sprint. And lastly, like what the designer Helen was doing in John's team, we also have the designer review each item to make sure that they're not broken before rolling out to customers. And of course, if you use the new board experience in Cloud, you can also see the attached images on card, which makes it really easy for anyone in the team to understand what the issue is about at a glance on the board. So overall, it's been pretty awesome bringing this team closely on this exercise. We've seen our developers getting really excited about this, excited enough that they're spending their innovation week fixing these issues. I mean, innovation week, that's the one week that they can do anything that excites them. Being close to the problem, they understand the importance of it. So you should definitely try this out with your team too. Of course, this process might look different based on your team's capacity, priority, and attention to details when it comes to defining MVP. But the important thing is that everyone is on board to tackling usability issues as a team, and everyone is owning the problem. And when everyone is owning the problem, they also need to know how to solve them. Sometimes when developers are fixing these issues, they need to make small to medium level decisions on the experience. And oftentimes they get stuck and blocked, or until PM or designer would help out, or they make their own decisions, whether they align with the overall design direction or not. And this is quite likely if you have someone new in the team who doesn't have all the context of all the research that you've done. But in a really healthy team, everyone should be able to make the same decision that a PM or a designer would make in their absence. So to make sure that the knowledge is shared and preserved, we have a set of design principles to explain the philosophy behind the new Jira experience. We share this with everyone, and we also print them out and put them on the wall. So anyone in the team or who is new to the team understands the design decisions that we've made and also can follow path. For example, a developer might wonder, why do we add configure button in the issue that sends users to issue type settings page? So that the customer understands the relationship between an issue and how it's configured, even though the issue type configuration setting lives under project setting. Or they might wonder, what makes smart filters smart? It's smart design because filters are dynamically added only when they're relevant. So if there are labels on the issues on the board, then we show labels filter. If there are more than one issue types on the board, then we show issue type filters. all without having to write GraphQL queries yourself. So if any of them is not shown, you know that it's broken and needs to be fixed ASAP. So when someone has a question on a design decision, anyone in the team can point at the wall and say, this is why we're making this call. And of course, there are questions that principals alone can't answer, so a PM or a designer would need to step in. But the focus here is to have the team engaged in the matter of product usability. It makes a worldly difference when everyone tries out the experience themselves, discovers problems, and own them. So, there you go. Now you know what's been happening behind all the changes we've been shipping to improve product usability in Jira. We took an honest look at Jira by putting a number on it using UMX Lite, which was critical for us to catch any spots that we missed and iterate on. We also used team profiles based on you to reimagine Jira and make it more simply powerful, like what you've seen with the workflow example. And we also have rituals in place to build usability muscles as a team. And now, what about you and your team? Where are you guys on this journey? And maybe your product is already super awesome and easy to use, but what I talked about today should still bring value to your customers and your team, because at the end of the day, it's about bringing those two closer. So thank you all so much. Hope you enjoyed this year's summit, and I'll be here if you want to chat. See you at Bash. Let's go drink.
All right, thank you, Erika. We have a couple of minutes left before the very end of the day. Does anybody have any questions that they want to ask? Yep.
So all these things that I saw just now, that's all Jira Cloud, right?
Yes.
So I know you get this question all the time, but how is that going to be reflected in server? You know, those features.
Yeah. That's a great question. How are these changes going to be coming to server? I know that you guys are probably been getting the consistent messaging from us, but cloud and server and data center team all regularly update their roadmap based on their deployment options customers' needs. And so if there's anything that you absolutely love from the things that we ship, I recommend that you go to and find one of our server PMs and shake them and say, this is what we want in the product, to help them prioritize it for you.
Any other questions? Okay. Erika's here if we want to chat after and ask any other questions, but otherwise, please enjoy Ship It Live and Bash this evening. Thanks so much for coming.